Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 3. We're going to be talking about the allegory of the cave this week, and then later on, the theory of forms. So, part of the reason why we're talking about the allegory of the cave is to round out what we've already talked about with Socrates. So, Socrates was looking for objective knowledge, right? He wasn't just looking to know how people felt or what he thought was best or what someone else thought was best. He wanted to know what actually was best, right? So we don't want to know what you think a definition for a word is. We want to know what the objective definition for a word is. We don't want to know how Thales feels about reality and what Anaximander feels about reality. We want to know which one of them is correct, if either of them is correct. So we're looking for that type of objective knowledge. And Socrates thought we could do that by searching for the definitions of words. Right? So in the Euthyphro, we get the discussion of piety. In the Meno, we start to get this discussion of virtue. And in the other dialogues, we see them talking about justice, goodness. Right? So he thinks by inspecting words and discussing these words with other people, we can weed out all of the bad definitions, all of the improper definitions, and come to a full understanding of the objective meaning of these terms. But as I've noted a couple times now, it's difficult to see how Socrates knew his project was worthwhile. Right? So you might think, hey, I'm searching for objective knowledge. An important part of showing that my project is worthwhile is seeing that we can actually attain this objective knowledge. So somebody who's skeptical of Socrates' project could walk up to Socrates and says, okay, well, I see what you're doing. I see that by discussing these things, we can come to a better understanding of the terms. But why do you think there's an objective fact here? Right? Why can't it just be that we all as a group think that this word means a particular thing? Some other group disagrees. We can't really figure out which one is correct, right? So maybe Socrates talks to this other group who has an alternative definition, and unlike what happened with Thales, he can't figure out what's wrong with these definitions. He just has a feeling they're wrong. The other group has a feeling Socrates is wrong, and Socrates hasn't given us a way to settle this dispute. Now, you might think that Socrates already feels pretty comfortable saying that, okay, well, we'll just find out what's wrong with that definition. By talking through it enough, we'll be able to get to a point where there isn't this disagreement anymore, and I can show that one of our definitions is bad. That would be a step forward, right? But we need this sort of final step to show that we can tie it all together. And so here we get the allegory of the cave, and then the theory of forms. So we have a couple different representations of the cave. This matches pretty well with the video you guys just watched. So in the cave we start out. You guys should be able to see my mouse here. In the cave we start out as these prisoners chained up against the wall, and our whole entire interpretation of reality is based around the shadows we see that are being passed on by the objects behind us and the fire causing those shadows. And the point here is that all of us are just having sort of this false representation of reality. Right? We don't actually know what's causing all of these things. The only information we have tells us that the shadows are what's real. And as the video said, we get really good, right, at predicting what's coming. We get really good at identifying these shapes, but it's all under the misunderstanding that these things are real, right? That these things are the real objects. And so when a prisoner is freed, gets to stand up and turn around, it's painful for him, right? They use the metaphor of it actually the fire, the light hurting his eyes. But it's painful for us because we have this cognitive dissonance, right? Hopefully you've heard that term before. If not, roughly what that means is that this new information is clashing with our current reality, current understanding of reality, right? So we think some things are true, and now this new information is sort of bashing against that, and it's uncomfortable. We don't know how to make sense of it. And so the prisoner is able to start to see the world in a different light, right? Now he has all of this new information, and this new information is giving him a better understanding of reality. Now, seeing the fire and seeing the objects, we're able to understand what's causing these shadows. We see that the real object isn't the shadow, it's actually the object being moved behind the wall. And so at this point, our understanding of reality changes. We realize that we were mistaken before, that things aren't always as they seem. And then this process continues, right? We make our way completely out of the cave into the rest of the world, once again experiencing that cognitive dissonance or that pain, the sun hurting our eyes, right? There's all this new information, all this new light hitting us. But now that we're out of the cave, we start to see not just how the fire was causing objects to cast shadows, we actually get to see the inner workings of all of nature, right? So we come out here, now we're at this step where this guy's standing, coming to understand that there are all these different objects in the world, trees, the river, sun, air, all of this going on. And we don't just see each object as it is, but we actually come to understand how all of these things work together. So once again, we've increased our understanding of reality, right? We thought, okay, well, really all there is fire, objects, and shadows, and that's it. And we see how that small little system works, but then we make our way out into the real world and understand how this whole thing works together. So once again, we've become more enlightened. And then finally, Plato shows us seeing the sun, and now finally understanding the sun's full role in everything there is. And so this is supposed to be an analogy for the highest sense of enlightenment. And this is where the theory of forms comes in. So if you're Socrates, you start out in the cave with some bad understandings or bad definitions. You start to weed out some of the bad definitions, start to get closer to objective knowledge, make your way out. That process gets even more complicated, but you come to even greater knowledge of these words. And then when you finally see the sun, right, you have the objective definition in hand. That's supposed to be how the analogy is working. And now once you have this objective definition, you have all of this objective knowledge you can bring down, right? And he says that's our duty, right, to come down and share that knowledge with those who are still unenlightened. So let's dive in. I mean, that's a pretty good description, but let's get a little more detailed. Right, so when we are in the cave, we're only seeing the way things appear. We're only seeing images, right? We're not actually seeing any objects. We're just getting sort of this false representation of the world. And so here's a good example of that, right? So when you put a pencil in water and look at it from a distance, it looks like the pencil is bent and disjointed here. But we know it once we take it out or before we put it in, right, that the pencil is actually straight, it's not bent. But when you're in that first step of the cave, what's happening is you see this bent pencil and you see that appearance and you believe it to be true, right? So if you had never seen a pencil or water illusions and then somebody hands you this cup with a pencil that looks bent, you know that appearance and you would think you know the facts about it. You'd say, hey, that's a bent pencil, right? But as we come to be unchained and see the fire behind it, right? See what's causing the illusion, right? So if you take the pencil out now and inspect what's going on, you'll move past the appearance and move on to some knowledge of the actual object itself. Okay, so now hopefully you're getting a feeling for how our increased knowledge can really move us out of these false false realities, I guess, is one of the best ways to say it, this incorrect interpretation of reality and closer to the objective fact. But then we need to get past just the objects, right? We need to see how everything works together. And we get to this deeper understanding of objects, right? So we've made our way out of the cave, and we get to see nature and how the rest of reality is sort of working together, right? And so for the first time, we get to understand not just what a particular tree looks like, right? But we come to an understanding, sort of a general concept of a tree, right? We start to see that there are more than just each particular object we're seeing. We can actually get to an understanding of the meaning of an object, right? We can abstract away from all the particular trees we see and come to have an understanding of what it is to be a tree. And then, so that's sort of this abstract knowledge we're getting. That's taking a step away from just our senses and the material world and starting to move into the world of the intellect, starting to move into a world where we understand things beyond just their physical appearances. And then that increases, right? So then we don't even need the sensible world. We can just start to live in this sort of intellectual world, right? We can start to see these particular triangles in the world and then reason about them, and we can come up with these laws about them, right? So that all triangles have internal angles that add up to 180 degrees. We can start to know these things without ever actually having to look at triangles ever again, right? They're just abstract facts that we can know. And so for Plato, this is an advancement, right? So we're not just living with the world of the senses, where the senses, as we saw with the pencil and the cave, the senses can deceive us. Now we're moving into this realm of the intellectual, of the pure intellect or the intelligible, and here we can find abstract truths. And then finally we come to our understanding of the role of the sun, or perfect knowledge. And perfect knowledge is what we'll discuss in the next video. That's really our knowledge of the theory of the forms. But what's supposed to be happening here is we move beyond just sort of that intelligible, mathematical, objective knowledge and come to this knowledge of real objective fact. We have perfect knowledge of the things in the world. Now, hopefully you're still wondering, how does this get us out of Socrates' problem? Right? How can we actually show that we have this perfect knowledge instead of just two people disagreeing with one another? And so that will be answered in more detail in the next video. So just put a pin in that for now. Let's round out this cave discussion. So once we have reached enlightenment, right, we have a duty as not just a philosopher, but somebody who's become more enlightened, to go back and inform the rest of the people in the cave that they lack this knowledge of reality. We need to go back and educate them. We need to go back and show them that there's more than what they've known up until this point in time. And as the other video showed, that's going to be painful, right? There's going to be backlash. But fighting for the truth, fighting for objective knowledge, is more important, right? So eliminating these subjective differences, like Socrates was worried about, right? Getting rid of the relativism of the sophists, finding a way to solve the disagreement between the pre-Socratics, right? Finding the objective is the most important thing. Okay, so that's our discussion of the cave. Hopefully you have a pretty good understanding of that now. And like I said, in the next video, we'll give you this full description of the theory of forms and hopefully be able to find a concrete answer to why Socrates' project was worthwhile and how we can find actual objective fact. All right? Thank you.